I'm going to show you the second Blitz game between Veselin Topalov and Garry Kasparov from day 3 of the Chess 960 event in St. Louis. If you want to see their first Blitz game, then do check on the link above. And of course, do check out the whole playlist for this Chess 960 event in St. Louis. It's really entertaining stuff. I'm also going to show you another game in another video from day 3, and that is in the match between Nakamura and Svidler. Also really entertaining stuff. Okay, without further ado, Blitz game number 2 from day 3. Topalov has the white pieces, and well, let's have a look at the baseline. The rooks on b1 and g1, very interesting position actually. They can support these pawn advances if necessary, and that can be very useful in some circumstances. Topalov put his pawn in the middle of the board, and this was met by pawn to d5. So it's a weird kind of Scandinavian, but I think this is a very good call from Kasparov. I think it's a good choice, because if pawn takes pawn, then queen takes pawn, and there's no knight coming to c3 to attack the queen, and the queen even attacks the pawn down there, so gains a kind of tempo. So this looks like a good opening from Kasparov. So Topalov pushed on. So now we have a kind of French pawn structure, but I think this is quite favourable for black, because he's been able to seize the centre straight away, and somehow black's bishops look quite well placed in this position. This one doesn't look so great. f4 from Topalov, and now quite a committal move, f5. So this physically blocks the f pawn, and also of course gives the knight some room to come out on f7. But here I think white should seize the initiative with g4. It looks a bit odd to play another pawn move when you haven't developed any pieces, but well, as we'll see in the game, actually Kasparov manages to take the initiative on this flank. And d4 looks reasonable, and g5. So in a blitz game, it seems as though black is taking the initiative, and when your opponent has the initiative, it's very difficult indeed. You know, do you invest time to try and find some way to change the nature of the position, or do you just kind of roll with it? Well, Topalov played fairly quickly. He just went with it. But I think the best move here is, again, to try to fight with that g-pawn supported by the rook. And actually, now somehow I think things have swung in white's favour. For example, if pawn takes pawn here, then the pawn has to advance. But this is quite a different situation actually. You know, I quite like the blockading piece here on d4. Or if pawn takes pawn here, then you can take, and a very odd situation with all the pieces on the back rank, but basically white's structure is pretty good here. Should be able to recover that pawn, but well, anyway, that's just a thought. But I think the problem is that after knight f2, then Kasparov reacts really well, taking space on the king side, and you know, it's annoying for white that the f3 square is controlled by the pawn, and plays b6 to support the pawn on c5. So basically all the play is going to be on the other side of the board, on this side of the board where the kings are, but black's pieces seem pretty well placed, and black already has some kind of initiative on this side of the board. And now knight c7, this shuffles across, g3. and h5. But I mean, given that black has this space here, it's going to be really difficult for white to do anything with h3. Very, very hard to use that h file. And now Topalov castles on the queen side. So these slightly weird castling rules we have in chess 960. The rook flips the other side of the king. Queen d7. This is interesting. So Kasparov perhaps prepares castling himself if necessary, bringing the rook to the d file, but also he's starting to clear the back rank here. He might want to castle on the king side, so he's keeping his options open. I think queen d7 is a very good move indeed. And of course it looks through the window here on this diagonal, which could be useful at some point. Now I think the best idea for Topalov is to exchange and play c4 just to block out black on the queen side. But I mean, this is still a very double-edged position. This bishop could be pretty good on the diagonal. It's not clear where black's king wants to be actually. He could start with bishop e7 and might toy with castling on the king side, and maybe later on advance this pawn. That's possible. But Topalov played c4, and well, Kasparov was now in his element. Probably the best move here is to take on c4, but very quickly Kasparov sensed a chance to attack. He played the pawn to b5. And his idea was that after pawn takes pawn on b5, not to recapture, but actually to play pawn to c4. So this is all about the initiative. Objectively, probably not the best continuation, but he played these moves so quickly with such confidence that that really has an effect on your opponent. In Blitz, you haven't got time to reflect, to try and find the refutation of such advances. You've just got to go with it. So Topalov has to get rid of this pawn. Now remember, Kasparov is 2 pawns down, but he's got a nice square on d5, and he should be able to recover one of these pawns, and he's also hoping to use that bishop in on a3, and then he might be able to castle on the king side, bizarrely. Let's see what happens. Queen d3, this was exchanged. Beg your pardon, not yet, he didn't exchange yet. Knight takes b5. So yeah, Kasparov has very active pieces, and he's hoping to trap white's king on this side of the board. Remember, white has castled, but black hasn't yet. This is the bizarre thing in this position. Knight c2 brings the knight across. Good move. Bishop e7, so he's preparing to castle on the queen side. Topalov exchanges, threatening pawn here, and queen b3. And Gary just brings the knight back to c7, threatening the queen. And here is where Topalov goes horribly wrong. Perhaps because Gary offered the exchange of queens, he didn't want to take it. He should, of course, exchange just to get rid of the danger to his king, and then step out of the way like this. Now, black certainly has some compensation with the knight on d5, but white should be doing fine here because, well, having brought the rooks over, should be able to exchange off that knight, and well, one day this bishop should be able to come out of the corner. Black's problem here is that it takes time for this knight to enter the game. It takes a long time, and can't support the knight on d5 very easily. So white should be fine there. But instead, Topalov avoided an exchange of queens with queen a4. And this was absolutely fatal. He was preventing the king from castling. Of course, the king can't step through the line of the queen. Perhaps Topalov was dreaming of some kind of attack here, and also at some point taking this pawn here. But he'd obviously overlooked rook b5, an excellent move from Kasparov. So sometimes you can play the rook to a5, but the main point is that it now allows black to castle, and that's what happened. So bishop c3, and now watch the king and watch the rook. That is a very nice castling move. The king is completely safe on g8, and the second rook is able to enter the game. And then white king is in massive trouble. Let's see what happened. Queen c6, clever move, looking at the bishop, but also setting up a discovered attack and clearing the d5 square for the knight. Bishop takes e7. Well, there's nothing better in this position. Rook b1 check, and this wins the queen. And knight c3 check was the final move of the game. Here Topalov resigned. A little bit premature, but if I just carry on for a little bit, you'll see that Kasparov has an absolutely wonderful initiative. Let's see. So the king's in check. So king c1. Queen takes queen. Now, having lost the queen, then white has to grab material back. So let's have a look at bishop takes rook. Now, the best thing for black to do here is not to recapture material straight away, but actually continue attacking with queen and knight. This is incredibly strong. Queen and knight are well known to be a really potent attacking duo. And white's problem here is that this king can't really escape. These rooks are the wrong side of the king. And it's very hard for white to stop this attack. Well, let's look at a couple of things. Let's see what happens if the rook moves. Well, now we'll take that bishop. King tries to escape, but we give a check. And the king has to come back. Now, can't do anything more with the queen and knight here, but we'll send knight number 2 round. Now, it takes a little bit of time, but once this knight enters the game, then that really will be fatal for the king. And as I said, white's pieces can't really defend in that situation. Another possibility here in this position, what about playing the knight to b4? Well, let's save the bishop. Now, it would be a mistake to take this rook. We want to keep the queen and knight together. So let's just push this knight out of the way, and the a pawn could be very useful as well. We'll give a check. We'll check on e4, and then we can take the knight on c2. And well, black's initiative just continues there. Material is, well, roughly level, but the pieces are so tied up. Remember, if this rook moves away, then queen d2 will be mate. The h2 pawn is also vulnerable. It should be a winning position for black, but well, yeah, I can understand why Topalov was completely demoralized and wanted to give up the game. So there we are. So Garry Kasparov fought back. The rapid play games were tied 1-1, but Kasparov won the Blitz games 1.5-1/2. So he's fighting back, and that's great to see. Tomorrow they'll play 8 Blitz games. I say tomorrow, let's say just day 4, they'll play 8 Blitz games. And I have a feeling that Garry will find more form with the kind of constant playing, if you like, just with the more games. You know, he'll roll into it. He'll get into his stride. Anyway, tell me what you think about Gary coming back sort of out of retirement again in St. Louis. I'd be very interested to hear your comments, and let me know how you feel about Chess 960 as well. And do check out the other videos. You'll see the links up there to other Topalov Kasparov games and the game between Peter Svidler and Hikaru Nakamura. Thanks for watching.